Good evening, Flying with Broken Wings. I'm RJ, and I'm here today with episode number 2 of RJ Says. So let's get right into it. Okay, our first question was actually asked by Rosie, and she wanted to know a little background information about me. I'm 53 years old, I live in Canada, and my actual clinical diagnosis is partial fetal alcohol syndrome. I grew up most of my life not knowing what was the problem, and I went through the classic disrupted school, went through various, well, I'm adopted, and I went through a whole lot of the associated things that come with going through foster homes, and a few brushes with the law. Ended up in a group home, which is probably really a good thing for me. And then later on worked in television for nearly 20 years. Eventually, I worked for CTV in Canada and ended up in Europe taking a little contract work working there in Czech television. A few years later, we fast forward to an industrial accident because after I'd been in television for a while, I suddenly decided to switch careers, and I took up truck driving. Probably not the best thing to do. Anyways, that's hindsight. I ended up injuring myself, and during the recuperation period, which was about 2 years, I had a lot of time to think about how I saw things, and a very good friend of mine, who did actually eventually become my external brain, suggested the idea of an assessment for fetal alcohol syndrome, or FASD, something along the FASD continuum. And long story short, at the age of 47, I was diagnosed. Now at that point, I found there was not a lot for, well, for anyone who's living with FASD, but for adults in particular. So that led me to a number of things that I've done. The first and foremost thing I did was I learned about FASD. I learned about the brain. Eventually, it took me to a postgraduate university course, which I completed last year. So educating myself about FASD was very important. Then I also reached out through Flying with Broken Wings, which you would all know. This was my way of connecting with an invisible population. And as you can see, we're not invisible, just the people were not listening to us. So here we all are. We get to listen. Basically, that's what brought me here today. Doing this off the cuff, one take. Now, this is a challenge for me to do these things because I'm doing this without very much for books. I have a little preparation, I will admit, so I do know the answer beforehand, but I pretty well have to rattle it off by memory. So let's go forward to Rosie's next question. She was asking about autism versus FASD. They're both spectrums. They're both spectrum disorders. One, autism, now to the best of my knowledge, is basically genetically caused. There are usually family links, not saying for sure because I'm not an expert on autism, but generally the cause is found within there, and as I know it, that sends signals when the baby is being formed, that the baby is formed in a particular way that's not neurotypical. We'll talk about the brain specifically. Okay, so autism is a different way that babies are formed, whereas FASD, the formation is going along normally, but then the teratogen of alcohol is added. So it's a slight difference in cause, but the two spectra do look very much alike. We share a lot of the associated secondary effects, such as sensory disorders and all of those sorts of things. The alphabet soup. We'll talk about alphabet soup one day. So hopefully that sort of gives you an idea of the two. And of course, we know FASD is not a diagnosis. It's made up of, in Canada, 3 distinct diagnoses: ARND, partial fetal alcohol syndrome, PFAS, and FAS, fetal alcohol spectrum or syndrome. I always get them mixed up. Hey, what can I do? I've got brain damage. Okay, moving on to our next thing. Wendy. Oh, Wendy. Wendy was asking about agoraphobia as a possibly related part of FASD. Again, not being a medical expert and only knowing what the clinical description of agoraphobia is, I would go as far as to suggest that it might even be one of our more commonly associated secondary effects, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. It can often look very much the same in the effects. And of course, agoraphobia means basically people don't want to go out of doors and that sort of thing. PTSD often manifests in the same way. That's why it's important to know what's going on with the brain. Now, formation is a very important part. This is my little friend, Mr. Bones here. He likes to help me out. Basically, when we are first formed, when we're just little guys, after the zygote stage, we start to form at the very base of the brain. Right here is the oldest part of your body. This is where we first form. From here, we form the central nervous system, and the spine tends to grow this way, of course, and the brain goes this way. So basically, from here, everything spreads out. When alcohol is introduced, though, the damage tends to start in this area, and it goes straight through like this and follows a straight line right down the midline of the body. So right in here, and that is where generally the worst of the brain damage is. Now, there's a lot of damage in the prefrontal cortex in that area, the frontal lobes. That is where we get a lot of our understanding and associations from. But the deeper damages, such as in the amygdala and things, also happen. Now, following down along the spine, we go down the midline of the body. A lot of physical problems with the heart, digestive organs, and sexual organs. And then the damage tends to spread out from there. And this is in the range of effects to number of people. So the most damage is right down our midline. So we kind of take that from there. Just wanted to throw that in there. After all, I got to bring Mr. Bones out, right? Okay, so we're moving on to our last question. I had three. I was really thrilled with the questions and the turnout. That was fantastic. I mean, it's a one-time thing, first-time thing, anyways. And we're going on to anger. Oh, now there is a big thing with a lot of people who are living with FASD and the people around us. Anger is usually a sign that something is wrong. Oh, well, that's pretty obvious. But we don't just go off for no reason. With me, a lot of times I'm able to hold things in up until I reach a certain point. Now, when we're dealing with kids, a lot of times that's when they get home from school. They come home, they feel safe, they can let down. They've been processing and just trying to, not stand out for so long all day. By the time they get home, it's just like, whew, and off it comes. And, of course, the parents get what they think is the worst of it. That is the kid decompressing. It's a reset for us. The actual brain function, of course, is fight or flight, and that's based in our limbic brain. Now, that is the way the brain forms. Is it forms like a basic brain or an animal-type brain. Some call it reptilian. And then the more advanced brain grows over top of it. Now, this is why brain formation is important. Because of the damage, we revert back to that limbic brain quite often. It protects us, gives us fight or flight. It's the same one that makes you shiver and takes care of your autonomic systems a lot of the time. Things we don't have to think about. When you see a fire and your heart rate goes up and the adrenaline starts to flow, that is all based basically in that area. Okay, so when somebody gets angry, you're tapping into a primordial protection circuit. They say we get a lot stronger or something. Um, that's adrenaline, and that is protecting themselves. Anger is often a way that we use to distance people. That is a learned thing, though. We learn that when we get angry, people will leave us alone, and then we have time to process. It's a way of asking for help, basically. And not one of the nicer ones, but it is effective, and it gets us that peace of mind. It's also, of course, a release, because we don't generally have the ability to speak out what's bothering us. 9 times out of 10, if something's bothering me, I don't know until I actually stop and think about it. So anger is a very, very complex thing, but we try and look for a direct cause that will, lead up to it. What is it? Is it a combination of too many things coming at you at once? Is it too many things that you don't understand? Is it too much processing? It could be the lighting. It could be any number of sensory things, and you have to add these things up. Now that's where we reach our limits, is each of those things is cumulative. So we add them all together, and we end up dealing with a lot of these things. A lot of times I'm just amazed at the number of things that people have to put up with. Anyways, that's sort of just where I'm coming from on that one. I hope that answers a little bit about the mechanics of it. If, dealing with it, that's an individual thing, and it often depends on, what the causes were and a lot of other factors. But that sort of gives you an idea of how the brain is working when it comes to anger and fight or flight. Okay, I think I've babbled myself nearly silly now, and I hope that I've been able to answer some questions for you, and got a chance to show off my snazzy new blazer. Let me know if there's anything else we can talk about, and I look forward to seeing you again in RJ Says number 3. Everybody take care now.